Hi, everybody. This is Jackie, and I'm here for Metal Sucks. I am here with Domenic, Romeo, and Austin Haines. Good evening, fellas. How we doing today?
Great. How are
Wonderful.
We've got to get used to talking on Zoom again. We got to take turns. We'll practice. We'll get
Yeah.
there. So I am talking with two dads of rock. I love that. Um, Taking turns. I'll start with Austin. How did you find out you were going to be a dad, and did you feel ready?
Um, man, my wife and I got married October 2019, right before COVID. And we had talked about, having kids and everything. Obviously, that's something you talk about, before you get married typically. But we had talked about it, and after our wedding we just took a couple months to kind of cool out, and then COVID came through, and that kind of put a plug in the whole plan, because it just didn't seem like a good or safe time to have an 8-9 month pregnant wife. And my wife's a nurse, so she's around sick people and all the time, and so we kind of just waited that out for a bit. And then I guess it would have been January of 2022, yeah, of last year. Uh, she was having all the signs and symptoms of someone who might be pregnant. So she took a test or two, and she had done that in the past, and it never really amounted to much. And at a time we weren't really trying. I wouldn't say we were necessarily trying at that time either, but um yeah, it turned out she was pregnant. And it was very, we have kind of an odd story, if you'll indulge me. It's My wife went to go see a doctor, when she early on to what they call the confirmation of pregnancy. And they said, yeah, they just give you the blood test, and it says, yeah, you're pregnant based on the blood test. Come back in this many weeks or this many days, and we'll give you a scan. And so I went with her to the scan, and the woman who came in, the nurse, she took the scan, and I'm looking on the screen, and like, based on movies and everything I've seen, I was just thinking to myself, that screen doesn't look right, or am I missing something on the screen, or what's going on here? So, and the nurse looked concerned, and then my wife was getting concerned, and the nurse stepped out, and she brought the doctor back in, and basically the doctor said, yeah, there's nothing there. If there was something there, what the doctor's words were basically, abortion, in the making. Something's going to happen here, and you're going to lose this. And I said, that seems really odd. So my wife has two older brothers that are both doctors, so we called them, and they said, go get a second opinion. So we took my wife to another doctor, where they were able to actually find the embryo, if that's the proper term. And they said, no, you're pregnant, you're just very, very early on, maybe about 7 weeks only. So they kept an eye on that for a while, and we came back a few weeks later, and there it was. And that, it looked then like what I was expecting to see the first time. Um and from there on, everything went extremely smoothly. My wife was throwing up and doing all the typical things, but it was exciting. Obviously, I was more scared than my wife was, but uh I have an anxiety issue, just aside from being, when it comes to kids. But I was excited, but I was scared. And my wife worked with kids when she was going through nursing school and everything, so she wasn't scared at all. But uh in the end, when she was born, it's exactly like what everybody says, which is like, you see them, and it's totally surreal, and totally, of course I cried, when she was born. And I know I'm not afraid to admit it, but it was very exciting. And my wife went through a very, very long labor with my daughter, for about 24 hours, just pushing probably for about 3 to 4 hours straight. Just very crazy experience, but it's great now. My daughter is a beast, and she is very, very big, 9 month old, but she's great, and it's definitely an experience to get to this point.
Thank you for sharing that, man. That's you took me on a roller coaster. I wasn't I got a little worried where we were going there, but
Sure.
I'm glad to hear definitely a happy ending. In that moment when your daughter was born, did you feel prepared to be a dad? Do you ever feel prepared to be a dad?
I guess it was more in the time leading up to it is when I was I was trying to make sure the house was okay, and we had everything we needed, and we're very lucky that I have parents that live very close to us, and my mom's very involved in helping us with the baby and everything. And I felt pretty good about it. I felt after maybe the first week after she was born, I felt I got like a big boost of confidence. I was like, okay, we made it through this first week. I haven't like freaked out or done anything crazy yet. And we got very lucky with her because she's was always a good sleeper. She's 9 months now, basically since she was a month old. She's been sleeping through the night entirely without too much fussing in the night or anything. So I think we got lucky with this one, but the next one maybe not. I think we're in for some bad karma, you know. But yeah, it's I definitely it's not like what people say. People kind of get you a little flustered and they say, oh, be prepared to lose your sleep and to do all these things, and you're not going to be able to do this and that. I think me and my wife had it down pretty well. And like we play music, Dom plays music, and uh, it's nice when you have someone like your wife who it can hang back with the kid or with the kids, and they're supportive of you, and that the baby's well taken care of, if you go away for the night or whatever. And yeah, it's nice to I feel more prepared knowing that I have that circle around us.
Very nice. Dom, was it just as easy for you?
Wow, it was a little further back for me. We're talking 2009 into 10. It almost seems like it does many lifetimes ago. Yeah, I remember finding out with it was my girlfriend at the time. We're no longer together, but the being finding out she was pregnant was like a complete like a whoa moment. Because, by then I was well into my 30s and it hadn't happened yet. I didn't think it was gonna happen at that point. It's just like almost miraculous. You know what I mean? Like the universe being like, okay, it's time. And there's a lot of similar things that Austin was mentioning, where it's just that first time you're going through it. I'm sorry, turn this to mute. Everything is, and since Austin's going around his first go around, I have three, so it's by the time it's third, it's almost like autopilot. But that first time, everything's real new, and every checkup is real wild, and you're going in and you're seeing the ultrasounds for the first time, and you're like seeing this little human take form. It's just incredible, and you're like, well, it almost becomes sci-fi. I used to joke that it was like, there's a human inside a human, look out. It's like but it was just, I think being a dad was a role I was born to play more so than a musician. I like it more than a musician. I care less about music stuff these days. I'll throw it off the bus any chance I get to hang out with my kids. But the funny thing that I think that my funny moment comes towards the end, when it was like approaching labor time, and I had no idea how this worked. I thought the baby just fell out, right? And I was playing in a band called Pulling Teeth at the time, and we were playing a show in Florida, which from Maryland is a good, I don't know, generous 20-hour drive, and I was terrified I was going to miss the birth. And my whole thing was to we drove from Maryland to Florida, got out of the van, played, got back in the van, and drove right back. I was like terrified I was going to miss it. I thought Reagan, my oldest daughter, was just going to literally just fall out into the world. Like, I'm here I am. And she didn't. It was a very long and grueling labor. And, to ex-wife's credit, it was with no pain meds. I watched her, like, crank these kids out in like a good 20 to 24-hour session with no pain meds, just totally natural. And it was a sight to behold, And Austin's right. When you're holding your baby for the first time, it's like the universe makes sense, and nothing else in the world really matters anymore. Everything else seems stupid. Anything that you ever thought was important isn't. It's just kind of dumb. But I will offer a controversial take. They're not cute when they come out. They look weird. They look like wet old dudes. Like, you know what I mean? Like a tiny version of like a really wet senior that's like just shriveled up and weird. I think the cuteness comes in after a couple days when they acclimate to the atmosphere and their environment. Those first couple, I was like almost tried to give it back. I was like, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't. But
It's definitely interesting. Uh, uh, my wife was in a similar situation where she did get an epidural, but they called it a failed epidural, meaning that however wherever they injected it or however they did it didn't take. So she was sitting around for hours saying like, why isn't this working, why isn't this working? And it was just basically essentially it was basically like she was giving a natural birth when the time came. And they kept giving her more and more into the little pick, in the epidural pick, and they were giving her stronger medications to see if it would kick in. And but after like a 4 hour session of pushing, she was spent. And when she finally actually got the baby out, it was like uh, she was kind of almost like in a haze where I don't think she even realized for a good like 15 or 20 minutes what was going on after the baby came out. So
yeah,
they actually gave the baby to me, and they said, "Yeah, hold her for a little bit. She's kind of coming back to it." And I said, "Okay." And I set her down, and I tried to just set her down to my wife and kind of just like be there as close to them as I could because I didn't want my wife not to hold her. So it's definitely interesting, not at all what I expected. And my wife was having a little bit of trouble pushing her out towards the end there. And not to get too graphic, but the doctor calls me around. I'm on the side of my wife and I'm holding one leg up like this, the nurse is on the other side holding the leg up like this, and the doctor's telling her, you're so close, you're so close, I can see the head. And the doctor calls me around to the front end, where the baby's coming out, and she takes my hand, she says, give me your hand. And I might have a glove on the hand, and she puts my hand right in there to feel the baby's head, and she says that's how close the baby's head is to coming out. I was like, okay, I get it now. And I'm telling my wife in her ear, I'm like, listen, you're like maybe like 2 good pushes away from getting her out of there because she's just struggling. But I think the doctor wanted me to see and try to reassure her that it was really that close. And then they started to, once the baby was like maybe at the shoulders, all of a sudden all the nurses started getting all kind of nervous, and one of them jumped up onto the table above my wife and was like flipping her around and pressing on her. And I guess there's something where if the shoulders are too wide when the baby's coming out, when they're pulling the baby out, it can like kind of stretch the neck and it can cause all these kind of problems. So the doctor's got 2 hands in my wife and she's going like this and she's trying to spin the baby around. It was like, and they don't tell you what's happening while it's happening. They just do it because it's like a quick thing that they got to handle. And then I was like, what the hell's going on here? And they said, and then they explained to you after the fact, and I'm just sitting there like with my hand on my head, like, oh, what is going on here? This is too crazy. But all in all, everything ended up good. And I'm glad things worked out, for you as well. It's just you have 3 kids, which
yeah.
is
I
that's
I, uh, I sent a picture of the baby to all my friends and coworkers. With the first time, obviously all 3 times around, all 3 times were equally magical, but the first one has that extra bit of magical because it's the first time, and you're experiencing everything for the first time. And I sent everybody a picture of the baby, and I thought it'd be funny to send my one friend a picture of the afterbirth. Except I messed up and I sent everyone at my work the picture of the afterbirth. It was
yeah, I'm sure they
yeah,
appreciated it.
yeah. They
There was a lot of blood when at the time, and I remember looking down at the ground under the table and thinking like, man, that seems like way too much blood on the floor. And I asked the doctor, I said, should it be that bloody? She goes, oh well, everything that was going on in the long labor can cause that. I mean, it looked like a crime scene on the floor. It just huge puddles of blood. I have a picture on my phone somewhere because I thought it was so crazy. But it's absolutely an experience. And my wife already is talking about having another, so it's like they get one and then they're living through it and they're like, oh, I need to do this again. My wife loved being pregnant. She reveled in every second of being pregnant, which is nice for her, and I'm glad that she enjoyed it for the most part. But
if I could pass along advice that I didn't listen to was keep them in even numbers because as they get older, you can pair them off. 'Cause I have 3,
sure,
and it's a constant like tripod of one person being excluded and
sure,
war
yeah.
all
I
the time.
I told my wife we'd most likely cut it off at 2 because it was always one for the longest time. My wife and I have been together about 9 years, And it was for most of that time, it was always her convincing me just to have one. And I said, okay, yeah, cool, we can have one. And while we're at the hospital, I'll schedule my vasectomy and I'll just get it done while I'm waiting, But
Yeah, yeah.
now that was before I had the one. And now that I see what it's like to have the one, I'm like, maybe two's not so bad, But that is at least a little bit away from now. But yeah, it's definitely a really good experience.
You guys clearly have linked yourself with some very tough women. I am impressed with them and also a little shocked at y'all, and that's also fair. Um, I'm interested in how you guys who are in bands and involved in the creative arts, how do you involve your kids? Not necessarily like let's write a song together, but how do you share your love for all things creative with your kids?
I do a lot. It's it's ingrained in my DNA ever since they were little. And our life right now is like an episode of Bob's Burgers. There's like a song every 2 minutes about whatever. And I do things where like if you want something, I even do it to my wife. You have to make up a song, it's like, or I'll make up. It's like a constant. Just keeps the mood good, and everyone's always laughing. And like you gotta like be quick on your feet to think of something. It's not heavy metal songs by any means. It's a lot of oompa, like real like weird like just like whatever you could think of. And I've tried to share my interest in music with all three of my kids to various degrees of success. My oldest wants nothing to do with it. When she was little, she was into it a little bit and just hates music outright. Doesn't want anything to do with it. But her and I connect in other ways. We've made a kids book together called Sometimes It's Just the Guys, and we published it and sold a bunch, and it was really cool. And actually, we entered a chili contest for tomorrow. None of us ever made chili before. It's like but we just saw. I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to enter a chili contest. We should do it. And my wife's like, why not? So we went out and bought the ingredients, and Reagan, my oldest, was in charge of branding. She's really into branding, so she made. We have this whole backstory for one of our cats. It's a Russian spy. Her name is Boris. Actually, she's right here, and so she's very stoic and is very like, it is pretty good, I guess. Very minimal with the compliments. And so the chili's called Boris's Good Quality Chili because she's just like, it is good quality. It's good. It is enough. Take. And so Reagan's up there doing that, and then Evelyn and Damien are with Melissa, my wife, making the chili. And it's awesome. And to jump to Evelyn, my middle child loves music. We used to listen to a Kiss mixtape every single day on the way to preschool, and knew every Kiss song, sing them together. We really connected on music, and her favorite band is the Misfits. And Integrity had got to play with Misfits in Las Vegas, and she came along with me because it's her favorite band. And we saw Glenn Danzig in the lobby of the hotel, and she like ran up to him, and she was just like, and he was the nicest guy. He took a picture with her. He's like all in black, looking all like evil, and she's like in a tie-dye shirt, and she's just like, like, and it was adorable. And then my youngest guy, Damien, loves Twisted Sister. We connect on Twisted Sister, and it's just awesome. They all like things to different degrees, but I just try to nurture that. As much as finding things you like, it's also an outgoing. None of them care about the bands I'm in. I'll show them a magazine I'm in or whatever. I'm like, is this cool? They're like, yeah, no, whatever. But when it comes to just making stuff up and like that's where everybody thrives, I think. And that's where everyone's kind of at, including myself. Take much more joy into making a song up about like what we're having for dinner than like whatever song I'm going to make for whatever heavy metal band. It's a totally different vibe and place.
Kids will never think what we think is cool is cool. Like it just doesn't work that way. I teach ninth graders, and no matter what I say, I am incredibly uncool. So I get it.
It's been my strategy. That's to get them out of stuff I don't approve of, is to get into it full.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that's it. I love it. This is great. Okay, forget it. I'm done with it. I think that's great. How did you and your daughter come up with the plot for your book?
Well, I've always wanted to do a book. And I'm like, you know what? My daughter is an incredible artist. She's a great illustrator. And I'm like, if I write the story, how about you draw it? And she's like, okay, that sounds like fun. And the book is called Sometimes It's Just the Guys. And it's about, as I had mentioned to Austin before, the trials and tribulations of having three means one's always left out. And in our case, his little brother, Damien, all the time. The two sisters, Evelyn and Reagan, want to hang out all the time. And he's always left out, right? And he's like, Dad, what am I supposed to do, and the book is about me and him hanging out and the things we can do when his sister won't hang out with him, and
Uh,
we make tents and watch Scooby-Doo and like make snacks, and we would shoot Nerf bow and arrows at stuff on our heads, like trying to like get the apple off. Just like really like stuff. It's all things that we actually did. And I just think that anyone that's got a little kid, in this case, I'm not. It's not. I know it's gender specific, but it could easily be sometimes just the girls. But in my case, it was sometimes just the guys because I have a son. But I think anyone with a child can relate to, like, especially if you have like siblings, just like being able to turn to your parent and be like, let's hang out, and they're like, sure, and you do something cool and have a good time with it. And he loves reading it before bedtime. He still keeps it like by his bed, even though it's been a couple of years now. And I think it's really cool. And me and Reagan also did a choose your own adventure book for my wife for her birthday one year. And I mean, it was the elaborate, full on, like, turn to page 3 if you want to do this, turn to page 7 if you want to do this. And she did all the illustrations, and it was unreal. So we're working on we have a few other book ideas that we're kind of kicking around. My wife's a Latin teacher, and she's got some really good ideas for ones that apply to her curriculum, as well as just that are pretty fun to read. So between all of us in the house, we got a lot of ideas cooking all the time. It's pretty cool.
got a lot going on over there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Austin, I know your daughter's still fairly young, but is there anything sort of, I mean, I feel like Domenic has taken something that's kind of, everyday and something that everyone can relate with, and turned it into a great story. Is there anything that your daughter does that might make for good book or story material?
She it's nice to hear that, from Dom, that he's found ways to connect to his kids outside of music, because as somebody who, spends a good chunk of their life, doing this, playing this game and doing music, especially this kind of music that we do, it's like, you have, at least myself, you always had this fantasy about, whether you had a son or a daughter, that it, you could connect with them through music at some point, and they would like the stuff that you like. I was always more worried about that if I had a daughter, personally, because I thought maybe it'd be harder to connect to a girl through metal and this stuff, and horror and stuff that I like. And it's nice to hear that it doesn't have to just be those things, because I'd take anything that she's interested in, it's in her life, if it was something I could connect to her with. And it's nice to hear that firsthand, from somebody who kind of comes from a similar world,
Yeah.
which is really great. But it's, she is young, and she does have a big personality, though, and she's had a big personality, for quite a while. There was, when she was really little, and she needed to go to sleep, and she was small enough that I could hold her and kind of just swing her around in the kitchen and stuff. We always used to listen to I always tried to find something that was really kind of calm for her, and she really, for some reason, in the beginning, was taking to like country music, and we were listening to like Charlie Crockett or Casey Musgrave and stuff like that in the kitchen, and I would just hold her and we would rock around, and that usually put her out pretty well. And she always used to listen to the same couple songs, but she always had like a reaction. I could see it in her eyes or in her face when we would listen to these particular songs. And over time, she started kind of doing this thing where if we put on her songs, and now she's a little bit outside of those songs, and now she's more into like the kiddie songs, and like, Over the Deep Blue Sea is like her big song on YouTube that my mom always plays for her. But she does a thing where she goes like, and she does a rock back and forth, and she gets really into it. And it's funny because you can tell that she's reacting specifically to the music, and it's just exciting to see. And it's interesting to see because she's so young, but she's able to feel the rhythm of it, or the vibe of it, or there's something about any music that she's reacting to that's just like so crazy to see. Because I just couldn't imagine her having like any sort of a visceral reaction to music at all, being so young. But lots of people say that it happens, and it's definitely possible. I'm curious to see how my wife and I are pretty similar, and my house is like filled with like crazy shit like all over the place. Like I collect a lot of like horror and sci-fi and stuff, a lot of alien stuff. And so like that's all my basement where I am now. And upstairs is like all my Universal Monsters stuff. So my entire living room is like Frankenstein's and Dracula's and all and the mummies and all this stuff. And so I feel like if she grows up around it, maybe she'll either hate it to death or she'll, maybe it'll catch on for her. But everyone always asks me, when we talk about the second baby, do you want another girl, or maybe do you want a boy? And I think honestly, and I've grown now to really like having girl, and I think I would take another girl, to be honest, if I had the choice. I mean, I don't have the choice, obviously, but I feel like so comfortable now having a girl that it's like I don't want to change it, and I'll just take another one. But I think there's something in the connection between like a dad and a daughter that's different from your son. You could speak to that obviously more than I
Absolutely.
could, but
Yeah,
I've heard
that's right.
I've had people say that, it's a different type of relationship, and I really enjoy the relationship I have with her now. Even as young as she is, it just feels like so like tight knit. I come home from work and my mom's holding her at the door, and she does this thing, and she's smiling and she's doing clapping and stuff. It just like it totally like hits you right there. I'm just like, oh man, every day I come home, I get that. It's just it's so crazy, and it's just I, I'm excited to see where she goes, from here. It is the craziest thing ever.
Dominic, you mentioned this earlier that like your kids probably are literally not interested in what you do. But give it time. I can't say it's necessarily going to be when they're teenagers either, but maybe older teens, there's hope. Um, what about your music are you most excited to share with your kids?
I think, and I think this is the thing they actually do respect about it, because they don't care about, hey, dad can play guitar real fast, or dad can like do whatever. Just the fact that I was able to go around the world and make a bunch of records just from knowing how to play guitar, and having being able to connect with people that have similar interests, and that's the greatest lesson I would pass on to them, rather than knowing every Metallica song or how to play it. You know what I mean? It's like the fact that if you want to do something bad enough, you could figure out a way to do it, like I did. I was like, a kid from Canada. I moved here with $300 and a guitar and on a Greyhound bus, and didn't have anything. And I was like, I just wanted to play music and go as many places as I could. And eventually, obviously, things settled down and became what my life looks like now, which is incredible. But from very humble beginnings. And I like the idea that they can see that they can do the same thing. And when I make a record, it's never because, hey, I'm going to make a record because someone's offering me a bunch of money, or because, hey, this would be really cool and popular. It's when I make a record because it's like a life's work. If you listen to, not that anyone would except me, but if you listen to all my records sequentially, they all kind of just continuous. It's like a painting I'm working on my whole life. It's like I kind of go back to where I left off on Integrity's record, and then where the End Rain record picks up is kind of like, all right, I liked what I did there. I'm gonna try a few different things, and some of the things that worked, and some things I would like to try different. It's just a life work in progress for my own satisfaction that it exists, and I'm happy that I can hold the record in front of me and be like, wow, it's here. And I got to go to a bunch of cool places because of that. And yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think the big deal is that you can pretty much do anything you want in this life, to varying degrees. It's totally based on what your gauge of success is. It's never a success where it's like a headlining band that like, thousands of people or even hundreds of people might come see. But hey, you know what? You made a record and you got to go to Japan a couple times, or tour Europe a bunch of times. And to me, that's priceless. I feel like I think that's the only thing my mom will ever give me credit for either, as far as musical accomplishments go. She goes, well, you got to see the lot of places, Dominic. And I'm like,
Yeah,
so yeah, I guess it's that.
there's always a little bit of that. It's just I'd pretty much agree with that, all that as well. It's when my wife got pregnant, we were in the middle of like making our newest record that just came out, and it was like my focus kind of shifted to where uh, everything I had done with the band up to that point, was more for like a personal satisfaction. It was never about being popular or anything. It was just I really liked music. I liked metal. We saw something in the band, and we liked playing shows and going places. And I wanted to kind of, it was like the one thing I had that I still have that I can kind of leave behind. It's like a piece of you that you can always just like leave behind for them.
Sure.
And so with this new record, I like really wanted to. She wasn't born yet, but I really wanted to like do something that involved her. So I actually ended up taking and this was kind of the Sepultura thing that they did, but I kind of jacked it for myself, which was to take a recording of her heartbeat when my wife was still pregnant with her, and I actually used it on the album, in the last track of the newest album, in the very end of the track. And that'll always be there, and we can always go back and hear it. And then you get this fantasy where like one day she'll be old enough to listen to it, and I can listen to it with her. And I put her name in, and I put a message to her in the album. So if something happens to me or anything like that, it's there's always like a little piece of something there. I'm trying to find ways to build something worthwhile, that she could be proud of me for,
Yeah.
when she gets older, even if she doesn't fully realize maybe what it took to do all of that. She still hopefully sees, that I was trying to use it to connect with her in some way. And I just hope that, one day maybe she will be able to listen to our albums, or, and enjoy them for what they are. Or, every person who's ever been in a band that never went anywhere or did anything, I think always has this sort of sense of accomplishment, that they went to this place, or that they put out these albums, or that they, were able to start with so little and make so much out of it. And it's just, I want to continue to try to keep doing that, to keep building upon what we started, almost like as a tribute to her, because I want to, have something, with my stamp on it that she can look back at one day, pretty much.
I did the same thing with the last Pulling Teeth record. It was written when my dad passed away and when my first daughter was being born. So her first cries are at the end of the record to symbolize, that was the end of a chapter. Because that was also Pulling Teeth's last record. We broke up.
Sure.
And yeah, so and a funny story is I made Reagan, I made her head the logo for my record label for a long time, which was it was modeled after Omen 2 when they find Gale's wall and they see Damien's head on the
Yep.
wall. So I kind of took that idea but used Reagan's face. And
Yep.
so I thought, what, if anything, she's gonna get a kick out of like Eighth Planet Records were all over the world. So I'm like, someone in Japan has a record with her face on the back of it.
Sure.
Pretty funny.
And
And
it's definitely cool. It's just anything you can do, in tribute to your kids is like,
yeah,
it just feels like the right move. Like there's, you don't have to think twice about it. And that's why I like, like my dad, he passed when I was only 17. I'm 31 now. So, it's been a while, but you feel like, like when you lose a parent, or, like how you said you lost your dad, it was like, I feel like I missed out on some things, and I continue to miss out on some things, whether it's them like meeting my kids, or even just like wisdom that I could never get, passed down from my own dad. So now I feel this like weird sense of like duty to make sure that I pass down like every piece of knowledge I have down
yeah,
to my kid, and
yeah,
everything I possibly can pass on to her, that I know, because I had kind of had to learn a lot of this stuff on my own, when it came to, manly things, I was only 17 at the time, I had a lot of growing up to do, and I from 18 to about 25, I was on the road a lot, touring and doing shit like that. So I really just kind of got kicked into the world of, kind of scraping along on your own out there. And it was like, I don't want her to have to feel like she's doing that on her own. So you feel this weird kind of sense that you have to share with them everything you possibly can and make them as prepared as possible. She's only 9 months, so I can't imagine what it feels like, for you.
yeah. It's just I was never really close with my dad, so our dynamic was totally different. And I think what you pick up is kind of like to correct those mistakes and not repeat them. So I'm
Right.
like super involved in everything. I've been to every event. I don't miss anything. I mean, I've turned down shows because they're too close to a birthday, and I'm like, I'm not playing the show. It's like something else is going on.
Yeah, man. Family first. That's
It
always
just becomes
that's
a
the key.
thing. Yeah, and it's just I don't know, and like I dudes like you and Dylan from Full of Hell that are like
Hmm.
leaving a lasting legacy. It's awesome, I mean, and again, it shows them that what you could accomplish, if you really something you believe in. But it's also like it's a tangible legacy. We're like, wow, like you really did do a lot of stuff, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I
And with
definitely.
me, it became an issue where like I got divorced during the pandemic, which would have been like 2020, and happily remarried. Finally met the person I'm destined to be with, and everything's great years later. But back then, I had to make some hard decisions. I was in Integrity, which was my my favorite band of all time, and we were touring, and we were making records, and it was like living the dream. And it became a crossroads where it was like, I can keep doing this, and have to hand over the reins, or I give it up and I take over the reins with the kids. And I chose the kids,
Mhm.
no question, and left Integrity. And on great terms. I still play with them sometimes. They're like
Sure.
my best friends, but you have to make those choices of like what you're willing to really give up when it really comes down to it. And it was a no-brainer for me. It's never a decision I regretted, but it's definitely been an acclamation of never, like, it's just, I go to work every day and I can come home and hang out. It's kind of,
Yeah,
I've never done that in my entire life. So
it's worth it.
it's a learning curve, but yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Well, we are about out of time, sadly, but just to remind the viewers out there that, not only do the moms rock, these dads rock. Domenic with End Rain has new music coming out, and
Just
Austin
came
with
out.
Outer Heaven. Thank you. It just came out. So
Yeah.
new music this month from both bands, and stay tuned for much more. And thank you both to Domenic and Austin for this chat. And we'll check in sometime soon. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.